that after an extremely painful childhood, but the one thing you still need to know is who is your dad. You claim that you've always known you are not Ms. Mueller's biological father and feel bad.
Sometimes the truth we've spent a lifetime chasing is standing right in front of us. Sometimes the answers we fear the most are the ones that finally set us free. In the quiet storm of family secrets, one woman carries the weight of an unanswered question. A question that has shaped her entire life. After years of pain, abandonment, and emotional scars that never fully healed, she steps into a courtroom, not just for answers, but for peace. Her name is Miss Mueller. Her journey has been one of strength born from suffering, of determination crafted from despair. Raised without stability, without the warmth of parents who could protect her from the harsh winds of the world, she found her identity in survival. She grew up in foster care, shuffling from one home to another, never really belonging anywhere. The walls that were meant to shelter her became reminders of her displacement. And yet, against every odd, she turned her pain into purpose. She became her own hero, graduating high school with honors, serving her country with courage, building a future from the ashes of her past. But even the strongest hearts have one weakness: the longing to know where they truly come from. That is the question that brings her here today. Is the man she's believed to be her father truly her father at all? Across the courtroom sits Mr. Robinson, the man whose name is written on her birth certificate, the man who was once there at her birth, who signed his name in hope, or maybe doubt. For years, he has carried a secret uncertainty, a shadow of suspicion about whether the child he raised and then let go truly shared his blood. He insists he always tried to do the right thing. He was raised to believe that being a father meant standing up, providing, protecting, even when the truth is uncertain. Yet doubt lingers in his heart like an unspoken storm. For Miss Mueller, this is more than just a test of DNA. It's a test of love, memory, and identity. She's not only seeking a name or a lineage. She's seeking closure for the little girl who once cried herself to sleep in a strange bed, wondering why her family never came for her. She recalls moments when she reached out to Mr. Robinson, calls unanswered, support unmet. She remembers the ache of wanting a father's presence during her deployment, a moment that could have healed something inside her. But the distance remained. The silence was louder than any words could be. Mr. Robinson claims he was there, that he visited her, that he gave what he could. But for Miss Mueller, love cannot be measured by occasional appearances. It's measured by presence, by consistency, by the feeling of being wanted. And that's something she says she never felt. As the courtroom listens, another layer of this story unfolds. His doubts trace back decades to the complicated relationship he shared with her mother, Miss Cobbs. He recalls moments that made him suspicious, men coming and going, conversations that sparked distrust, emotions that clouded clarity. He claims he saw other men around, that he questioned her loyalty, that something inside him whispered that this child might not be his. But when love is involved, the lines between truth and illusion blur. He admits that he loved her mother so deeply that he would have done anything for her, even ignore the possibility that the child might not be his. He signed the birth certificate not because he was certain, but because he was in love. And love sometimes makes fools of us all. When the mother takes the stand, her words carry both pain and defiance. She denies all the accusations. She insists she was loyal, committed, and honest. She defends herself as a woman wronged by false assumptions and unnecessary suspicion. She claims the child is his, without a doubt. Her voice trembles, not with uncertainty, but with years of being misunderstood. And yet, the truth is tangled between them. Because even if she speaks from sincerity, years of mistrust have built walls too high for anyone to see over. Through it all, Miss Mueller sits silently, her eyes carrying the weight of both stories. The man who doubts her, and the mother who defends her. She's caught in the middle of their history, a living testament to a love that was broken long before she understood what love meant. Her memories of childhood aren't painted in color. They're in shades of loneliness. She remembers being taken to live with Mr. Robinson when she was 9, believing for the first time that she might have a real family. But what awaited her was not the love she hoped for. She says she felt like an outsider in that house, a stranger among people who were supposed to call her their own. Her stepmother allegedly reminded her constantly that she didn't belong, that the man she called Dad might not be her father. That's the kind of wound that doesn't heal easily, because every word like that cuts a child in places that never truly scar over. Mr. Robinson, however, sees it differently. He says he rescued her from foster care, that he brought her home to give her a better life. He insists that she was treated equally, that his wife cared for her like one of her own. But the stories don't align, and truth becomes another victim of time and perspective. When his biological son, Lamarcus, speaks, he paints a picture of a father who was strong, disciplined and responsible, a man who provided, who loved deeply, who did everything in his power for his family. Yet even Lamarcus admits there was doubt, whispered through the years, circulating in the neighborhood, clouding the truth. He says he and his siblings were told to love her, to welcome her, to see her as one of them, but that the tension between her and their mother made it impossible. For Miss Mueller, hearing that her pain is remembered differently is another reminder of how stories can split apart. She doesn't deny she struggled. She admits she was angry, defiant, hurting, but her defiance was never rebellion. It was heartbreak. And now, as an adult, she stands here not to accuse, not to punish, but to understand. She wants to know whether the man she calls Dad truly shares her blood, whether the love she longed for was hers by right or by chance. The air in the courtroom thickens as the years of distance, misunderstanding, and buried emotion rise to the surface. She speaks directly to him, voice trembling yet strong, saying she just wanted a father, not a perfect man, not a provider, but someone who stayed, someone who showed up. She reminds him of the time she was in danger, trapped in an abusive relationship, and called him for help. That call, she says, was her last hope, and when he turned her away, something in her broke that never fully healed. For Mr. Robinson, that memory pierces him. Maybe he truly didn't realize what that moment meant. Maybe he believed his refusal was practical, financial, circumstantial, but for her, it was emotional. It was abandonment revisited. The judge listens quietly, then speaks with compassion. The courtroom becomes a space not of accusation, but of release. This is not just about a paternity test. It's about healing generations of silence, about recognizing that family is more than paperwork and DNA. It's about responsibility, presence, and the courage to stay when it's hardest. When the results envelope is finally presented, every heartbeat in the room seems to echo. Years of unanswered questions, tears, and sleepless nights hang in the air, and then, with one sentence, the past begins to unravel. The truth, simple, undeniable, is revealed. Mr. Robinson is her father. For a moment, time freezes. The man who doubted now stands still, overwhelmed. The woman who hoped, who prayed for belonging, finally hears the words she's waited her whole life to hear. She cries, not out of weakness, but out of release. The anger, the rejection, the self-doubt, all dissolve into that single moment of truth. He embraces her, awkwardly at first, then with sincerity. The years they lost can't be reclaimed, but the future still holds the promise of repair. The judge's words are soft yet firm, a reminder that healing begins not with proof, but with forgiveness. She tells the young woman she is not broken, not disposable, not forgotten, that her worth was never defined by anyone's uncertainty. And in that courtroom, surrounded by strangers, something sacred happens. A family, once torn apart by doubt, is offered a second chance at love. The revelation that Mr. Robinson is indeed Miss Mueller's father doesn't end the story. It begins a new one, because truth, when buried for decades, doesn't heal instantly. It stirs everything that was silenced. As the courtroom air settles after the verdict, tears and relief blur together. Miss Mueller's heart beats with a mixture of joy and grief. Joy that she finally knows who she is. Grief that it took nearly 30 years to find out. She looks at the man who gave her life, but not always his time. And for the first time, she sees him not as the source of her pain, but as another flawed human being caught in his own battles. He too is crying. Quietly, uncomfortably, as if every tear is a confession. He spent years pretending to be sure, while carrying the weight of doubt. He tried to act strong, but doubt weakens even the proudest man. And in that moment, surrounded by truth, he seems smaller, gentler, humbled by the magnitude of what he almost lost. She tells him, trembling, that all she ever wanted was his presence, not his money, not his perfection, just his love. He nods, words caught in his throat, understanding that all the excuses, all the reasons, were never worth the cost of her loneliness. When she says she wants him to walk her down the aisle, there's a silence that feels holy. It's not about ceremony, it's about redemption, about the child who was once abandoned being embraced, not as a foster kid, not as a burden, but as a daughter. The judge's words linger. Move forward by not moving back. It's a truth for them both. To start again, not by rewriting the past, but by refusing to repeat it. But the courtroom's doors don't close with that single story. They open to others, each with their own battle between truth and denial, love and betrayal, pride and pain. Because here, in this space where science meets emotion, DNA doesn't just decide biology, it decides legacies. The next case echoes with a different kind of ache. A young woman, Miss Jefferson, walks in carrying not just the weight of rumor, but the burden of reputation. She's accused of lies, of infidelity, of fabricating a story about who fathered her child. She stands tall, but trembling, defending her name, not just against one man, but against a world that delights in gossip. Mr. Singleton, the man she once loved, insists she cannot be trusted. He claims deception, pointing to inconsistencies, to stories that shift like sand. Between them lies a baby, innocent, fragile, unaware that grown-up choices can sometimes scar a child before it ever speaks a word. Their argument isn't just about DNA. It's about dignity. She says he abandoned her. He says she betrayed him. She claims he took her baby's clothes out of spite. He insists they were his to take. They hurl words like weapons, trying to wound each other deeper than truth ever could. But beneath the bitterness, there's pain. Shared, intertwined, unspoken pain. Because once there was love, there was laughter, shared dreams, plans for a family. Then came the doubt, and with it, distance. The judge's voice cuts through the chaos like calm through thunder. It's not about you, it's about the baby. That single sentence reminds them both that beyond their egos, beyond their anger, there's a small child waiting for peace. When the envelope arrives, the silence is unbearable. They brace for impact, for truth to choose a side, and then, once again, a revelation. Mr. Singleton is the father. The anger fades into tears, the denial into humility. He apologizes, awkwardly, genuinely, for taking the clothes, for the doubt, for the pain he caused. She accepts not because forgiveness is easy, but because holding on to hurt is heavier. The court reminds them, you move forward not by winning, but by growing. For them, truth isn't punishment, it's possibility. But the next story is even more complex, a tangled web of love, betrayal, and overlapping timelines. A husband stands before the court, pleading for proof that the child born during his marriage is truly his. Mr. Hicks, a man who loved his wife deeply, finds himself facing not only betrayal, but humiliation. His wife, Miss Navarre, admits she cheated, not just emotionally, but physically, with another man, Mr. Osorio. She says she's no longer certain who the father is. The courtroom becomes a storm of denial, accusations, and pain. Mr. Hicks fights to hold on to the child, not because of DNA, but because of connection. He cut the cord. He signed the birth certificate. He stayed when she left. He calls himself the father not because he's sure, but because he chose to be. Miss Navarre argues with venom, yet underneath it is fear. Fear of exposure, fear of consequence. Her voice rises, her emotions spiral, her guilt turns to anger. The truth begins to show not just through her words, but through her silence. Then, as if the universe itself demands closure, the results come in, and the court reveals, Mr. Hicks is not the father. The room stills. For him, it's not just a scientific fact. It's heartbreak. The child he loved, held, named, is not his by blood. His world collapses in quiet devastation. The judge speaks, not just to him, but to every soul in the room. You cannot play with a man's heart like that. You cannot lie about a child's origin and call it love. The woman stands, angry yet exposed. The lover she thought would save her is suddenly unsure if he can trust her either. And then, another truth arrives, one that changes everything again. The DNA reveals that Mr. Osorio is the father. Shock. Silence. Then, realization. The baby's real father is here. But so is the man who raised her for 2 years believing she was his. And in that tangled human tragedy lies a deeper truth. DNA defines biology, but not always love. Mr. Hicks walks away, not as the biological father, but as a man who once loved fully and lost deeply. A man who deserved honesty and never got it. And the court reminds everyone that deception, no matter how well intended, always leaves wounds that science cannot heal. Then comes another chapter. Another story of love, tested by suspicion. A young woman, Miss Brown, enters the courtroom clutching photographs and fear. Her child, just 2 months old, is at the center of a storm she didn't expect. The man she believes to be the father, Mr. Jones, denies it entirely. He claims she's manipulative, that she's lied, that he's not the one. But beneath his anger is something else. Confusion, exhaustion, maybe even regret. He admits to doubt, but also to the fact that he was there, that he once believed. She speaks of struggling alone, unable to work, unable to afford childcare. Of nights when she wrapped her baby in towels because she couldn't buy diapers. Of the humiliation of calling him, begging for help, and hearing silence. Her story isn't one of deceit. It's one of survival. When the court hears she was once arrested for stealing baby supplies, there's a collective pause. Not because of judgment, but because of empathy. Desperation makes people do things they never imagined. Mr. Jones listens, shifting uncomfortably. For a moment, his pride fades, replaced by something human. He admits he could have done more, but also that he feared being deceived. Then the DNA test results are read. Mr. Jones, you are the father. He freezes, then exhales. The kind of breath that carries relief and responsibility. He admits he's scared. The judge smiles softly, telling him that fear is natural. But fatherhood begins with courage, not certainty. For Miss Brown, it's vindication, not triumph, but peace. She doesn't gloat, doesn't shout. She just whispers thank you. Because sometimes, the quiet truth is the loudest healing, and still, the stories keep coming, each more layered than the last. There's Mr. Jacobs, a man haunted by a single train ride that changed his life. He met a woman, Miss Call, by chance. They spoke. They connected. They spent a night together that led to years of confusion. When she appeared at his door pregnant, he wasn't sure what to believe. But when he held the newborn child, when the baby opened his eyes as if recognizing him instantly, something in his heart decided. He signed the birth certificate. He gave the baby his name. He called him his son. Years later, he's standing in court paying child support, yet hearing from the same woman that the child might belong to another man. Mr. Cooper. Mr. Cooper, confident yet dismissive, says he's certain he's not the father. He describes her as reckless, unfaithful, untrustworthy. But he too has bought diapers, brought formula, maybe out of care, maybe guilt, maybe uncertainty, and then In the cruel twist of fate only life can write, the results reveal the unthinkable. Neither man is the father. The courtroom erupts. Gasps, disbelief, a mother standing speechless. For the first time, her confidence cracks. The truth, long buried beneath pride, rises. She admits there may be others, other possibilities, other nights she'd rather forget. The men leave in silence, their faces heavy with a mix of sadness and relief. They came seeking clarity and left with emptiness. And the child, innocent and beautiful, becomes a symbol of the unanswered. A reminder that sometimes truth reveals not closure, but consequences. The judge's words fall softly but firmly. Your child deserves to know where he comes from, not for your sake, for his. Every case, every test, every tear-streaked face carries the same longing, to belong, to be seen, to be known, to be connected by something more than blood, by love, by truth, by acceptance. And through all the chaos, all the accusations, there's one constant, the yearning to be chosen, whether it's a daughter seeking her father, a man defending his love, or a mother fighting for validation. They all stand before the same invisible mirror, asking the same question, who am I to you? Because family isn't just made in the body, it's made in the heart. As the next case begins, the air in the courtroom feels heavier, as if the walls themselves have absorbed all the heartbreak from those who came before. Each story leaves behind a residue of emotion, and this one too carries its own share of pain. A woman named Miss McDuffie steps forward, holding the hand of her little girl, Somaya, bright-eyed, innocent, unaware that the adults around her are here to debate the truth of her very existence. Across the room stands Mr. Edwards, the man Miss McDuffie insists is the father, though he has spent years doubting it. Her voice is steady, but laced with exhaustion. She's tired of proving, of pleading, of waiting. She says she's had enough of the back and forth, the hot and cold affection that leaves her child confused and her own heart weary. He's a pop-in, pop-out dad, she says. One day he calls her my baby. The next, he claims she's not his. He doesn't deny it. In fact, he admits it, though his words are not cruel. They're conflicted. He says he's afraid to love a child who might not be his. He's afraid to build a bond that might be broken by truth. In his uncertainty, he's built a wall that keeps him safe from pain, but also keeps him far from his daughter. When he tells his story, his tone softens. He remembers how he first met Miss McDuffie, remembers the spark, the laughter, the connection, but he also remembers the doubts, the timing, the questions, the whispers. And doubt, once planted, grows quietly but persistently until it takes root in everything. The judge listens, her face gentle yet firm. She's seen this too many times. The tragedy of love poisoned by uncertainty. She reminds them both that the child's well-being must come before pride, that the truth, however painful, will set them free, one way or another. When the results envelope is finally opened, the room goes still. The judge's voice echoes softly but powerfully. Mr. Edwards, you are the father. Tears break through silence. Miss McDuffie exhales, not in triumph but in release. The ache of doubt that haunted her for years dissolves. Mr. Edwards lowers his head, shaking it slowly, not from disbelief, but from realization. He smiles faintly, a mixture of relief and remorse. He looks at his daughter, his blood, his reflection, and for the first time, there's no hesitation in his gaze. He whispers softly, "She's mine." And in that moment, all the battles, all the accusations, all the uncertainty fade. What remains is simple, the undeniable connection between a father and his child. The final case of the marathon opens with tension already in the air. It's the story that gave this episode its haunting title. Is the man from the train the father? A chance encounter that spiraled into a lifetime of confusion. A love story that began with attraction, ended in mistrust, and left behind a child who now needs answers. Mr. Jacobs met Miss Call on a train. Two strangers whose paths crossed by coincidence, but changed everything. She complimented his eyes. He smiled, flattered. What began as conversation turned into connection. What began as curiosity turned into intimacy. That same night, they crossed a line neither could take back. And a few weeks later, she appeared again. This time not as a stranger, but as a woman carrying his possible child. He remembers her sitting outside his apartment, pregnant, waiting. He remembers the shock, the questions, the disbelief, but he also remembers holding her hand, listening to her words, and deciding, perhaps against logic, to do the right thing. He was there when the baby was born. He held the child first. He looked into the newborn's eyes and felt something stir inside him, something unexplainable but powerful. He named the child Samar. He signed the birth certificate. He told himself this was his son. And for a while, that belief was enough. But time and rumor and resemblance have ways of unraveling even the strongest convictions. As Samar grew, whispers grew louder. Whispers that the boy didn't look like him, didn't share his features. Whispers that perhaps another man, Mr. Cooper, might be the real father. Miss Call, once silent, began to echo those whispers. She claimed that she now believed Mr. Cooper was the biological father. Mr. Jacobs felt betrayed, not just by her, but by the very trust he'd built his life upon. "How could you let me sign that birth certificate?" he asks, "if you knew there was doubt?" Her response is calm but evasive. She insists she didn't know for sure. She says it was possible, but she wasn't certain. Her voice trembles with half-truths, the kind that don't lie, but don't tell the full story either. When Mr. Cooper takes the stand, he is casual, detached, even smug. He says he's sure the child isn't his. He describes Miss Call as reckless and unfaithful, a woman who was doing her own thing. He admits to helping her once, buying diapers, bringing formula, but not because he believed the child was his. He did it out of kindness, he says, out of pity. And so the triangle of doubt closes in. One man who wants to be the father, one man who refuses to be, and one woman caught between them, or perhaps manipulating them both. Then, the envelope arrives. The judge opens it slowly, her eyes steady, her voice measured. The truth inside is one that neither man nor the mother is ready for. "Mr. Cooper, you are not the father, Mr. Jacobs. You are not the father." The silence is immediate, sharp, and deafening. Miss Call doesn't gasp. She simply lowers her eyes. It's not shock that crosses her face. It's resignation. Deep down, perhaps she already knew. Perhaps she hoped the truth would never find her. The judge stares at her with both disappointment and pity. She reminds her that her child deserves more than confusion. He deserves clarity, identity, truth, that the weight of uncertainty will not fall on her shoulders, but on her child's. Years from now, when he asks, "Who am I?" Mr. Jacobs stands frozen. For years, he paid child support, visited, called, believed. He held the baby, fed him, watched him sleep. He called him son. Now science tells him otherwise. But no test can erase memory. No paper can unlove a child. He leaves the courtroom not as a father but as a man who once was. And that is its own kind of heartbreak. By the time the final gavel sounds, the courtroom feels lighter. Not because the pain has vanished, but because the truth has finally been spoken one by one. These people walk away carrying different forms of truth. Some leave reunited, some leave broken, but all leave changed. For Miss Mueller and Mr. Robinson, truth brought healing, the kind that only honesty can give. For Miss Jefferson and Mr. Singleton, it brought humility, a reminder that forgiveness is stronger than pride. For Mr. Hicks and Miss Navarre, it brought pain, but also liberation from a lie. For Miss Brown and Mr. Jones, it brought fear mixed with joy. Proof that truth can unite as much as it divides. For Mr. Jacobs, it brought devastation, but also freedom from a burden that was never truly his to carry. Every test, every tear, every verdict becomes part of a greater message. that the pursuit of truth, though painful, is sacred, because truth is not the enemy, silence is. The courtroom becomes a sanctuary, not of judgment but of reckoning, a place where people bring their wounds, their doubts, their lies and their hopes, and leave with something real, not always happiness, not always closure, but always truth. When the cameras fade and the audience rises, what lingers is not the drama, it's the humanity, the faces, the trembling hands, the broken voices, all tell the same universal story, that we are all searching for belonging, to be known, to be claimed, to be loved without condition. DNA may tell us who we're related to, but it cannot tell us who we are. Love does that. Presence does that. Forgiveness does that. And as the judge's final words echo through the quiet courtroom, they carry a weight that feels eternal. You are not defined by someone's doubt. You are defined by your own worth. For every daughter who grew up without answers, for every father who doubted himself, for every mother who carried both guilt and hope, this is more than a verdict. It's a reminder that truth is not the end of the story. It's the beginning. Because once truth is known, healing can begin. And sometimes that's all a family needs. Not perfection, not proof, but peace. The court adjourns, the lights dim, but the stories, these raw, human, messy, beautiful stories, will live on in the hearts of those who watched. Proof that no matter how far apart love and truth drift, they always find their way back to each other.